Hey everybody, it's John Stigall with my best buddy Mandy Norris, and we are Astro Transformation. And so we're bringing you our updates, the latest on where we are this first week of December. And so we have a very, very interesting full moon that's coming up here, and I want to pull up some charts. So let me do that. All right, so you should be able to see this chart here. This is our sun opposition moon chart or moon opposition chart. This is the first full moon chart that we have, and we actually have two, believe it or not. We actually have a second
Mhm.
full moon that's going to take place at the very end of the month, which happens every 29 days or so. It just so happens we have two, one happening at the very beginning of the month, December 4th, which is actually today when you should see this, and then also on the very end of the month, just before New Year's. And so one thing we want to call attention to, and like we always try to approach this like for beginners. Like if you're an advanced astrologer, you get this. You probably can, you know, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. But basically, all full moon is the sun and moon opposing each other, and it's always driven by the moon because the moon moves faster than the sun. So at this point, we have the sun at 13 degrees of Sagittarius opposite the moon at 13 degrees of Gemini. And so basically, full moon is whatever the conjunction was. So which was basically the new moon coming to a head at this point in time. Emphasis being in Sagittarius, there's ideas, ideas or feelings, perhaps a feeling of an idea that's coming into the focus, through the moon itself that's being communicated, perhaps with passion, perhaps with energy. Wherever this shows up in your chart, in your natal chart, will suggest whatever those themes are that are being highlighted for you at this particular time. This chart, and by the way, I always said for Washington D.C. Sometimes I have Columbus up because broadcasting from Columbus, but when we look at things because we're based in the United States, we always try to look at things as they might affect the country as a whole. So, capital of the United States being Washington D.C. This is actually the full moon chart for the country at that point in time. So Eastern time zone, 6 o'clock and 14 minutes and 5 seconds exactly is when this will be exact. So this is the chart. And so just, we look here, and really not covering like political astrology or mundane astrology, but just, like this gives us a sense of maybe where the nation is right now, like between the sixth house, which is, Virgo's house, and the 12th house, which is Pisces house. There could be some focus around issues of health, work, different things. We see Mercury, not Mercury, but we have Mars here. We have Venus down here and the moon. So there's some issues around this. There's some issues around, kind of thoughts on perhaps work, labor issues, concerns of that nature, which we do know there are some economic challenges going on right now. And then over here, sort of like, 12th house can be, sort of the spiritual, unseen realm, world of things, how people are maybe feeling on a spiritual, emotional level, and this being the moon here, though. And 12th house is often where we hide things in when it comes from to an astrological perspective where we see an unraveling. So I would suggest maybe people aren't necessarily as a whole in the country, we might not necessarily be expressing our feelings. We're kind of having them, but maybe not necessarily being able to articulate them. And, one thing, of course, Gemini is good at is speaking on things. But
Mm.
Gemini does a better job of talking about things and really feeling things. So I would say, looking at this chart as a whole, I mean, we're looking at, we look at other relationships with different planets too. Like, we've got some things in, Pisces, some Aries planets, but um, I think the thing that really just stands out to me is, both we have this going on with, of course, the full moon. But also, we look here, and I want to speak into this, Mandy. We have Venus and we have Mars both in Sagittarius around this time. And this is actually going to go on till about middle of the month, the 15th. So anytime we have Venus, which represents our feminine, not necessarily women, but feminine energy, and to the extent that we all embody it, which we do. Mars is a masculine. When we tend to have these close together, we'll see as they get closer because they are going to track each other pretty closely. And around January 6th, we're going to have a conjunction of Mars and Venus in Capricorn. When we have a lot of planets in the same sign, a lot of what happens typically is we'll see, maybe where there's been some division, there's been some misunderstandings, there's been some strife or whatever, conflicting ideas. We'll start to see kind of a coming together. We'll see sort of like, bridges being built between where there's been conflict like there's been a lot in society as I know you and I both know this, Mandy, of like here's the masculine and it's unhappy about things, feminine says, well, we're going to do this or whatever. And I mean that the way I'm speaking of it, it's like we're talking about men and women not seeing eye to eye on things though, but just also those energies in general. There's a very like my experience is there's a very like heart masculine, let's do it this way, let's get it done, even if we run roughshod over everything. Whereas the feminine's like, well, no, let's just let everything be. And the masculine's like, well, you don't get anything done. The feminine's like, well, you're too brash and rough and difficult and you destroy everything. Well, here we're
Mhm.
at a point where we might actually see some conversations about, well, hey, masculine says, well, we do need to kind of like stop and think about things a little bit more. And where the feminine says, well, hey, maybe we actually need to get some things done. So we'll see. I guess what I'm
Yeah.
saying is just like look out for that, not in a bad way, but just like look for opportunities where people who don't normally engage with each other might actually come together. And I'm not, again, not specifically speaking on men and women, but when we do have Mars and Venus come together, I mean, it is a good time for the masculine and feminine to meet, but also like, where there are conflicts, where there are ideological differences, we start getting this pileup, which, even down here, Mercury moves fairly quickly, and it's going to be in Sag. It's going to enter here in a
Oh.
little bit in a few days. So communication and thinking, plus the feminine, plus the sun, which is ego and, sort of our core identity, and then Mars. So when these all get together in Sagittarius, they're going to have a conversation. Like, I mean, maybe literally, have a conversation. Or I just mean to say, you may see opportunities for communication in these areas of your life, and perhaps with somebody that you wouldn't normally expect to have that kind of conversation with. And so that's what we're seeing around this time. And it may actually go back to, I want to pull up this chart here. Let's see if it comes up. So we have the other chart that this is based upon, which is actually the sun conjunct the moon or the moon conjunct the sun. This was our new moon conjunction that happened on November 20th, 2025. So 1:47 a.m. in the morning, 17 seconds in Washington, D.C. So you can see the two of them down here. Of course, again, for those who are just learning astrology, anytime you have these two planets together, you have a conjunction, which is the beginning of a cycle. So this is basically a spring. So the moon and sun are just basically having a spring cycle. Well, now we're in the harvest, or we're moving in the harvest as of December 4th. So look to these planets, like go back to what happened maybe here. You probably weren't awake at like, 1:47 a.m. in the morning on November 20th. I'm sure you weren't, Mandy, and I know I wasn't.
No, I
Maybe
was
I actually
not.
was actually, but
You
um
might have been.
yeah, but go back and look and see like what was going on that early in the morning, because chances are, we're around that time. Maybe you had an idea, maybe you had a dream or whatever, but that may
Mhm.
be what's coming to a head at that, around this time now. Also, I find it interesting Mercury was here. It was also 28 degrees. It was retrograde, so it was passing over these points. And so they were all basically talking to each other. So I'd say maybe there's an idea, maybe there's a thought you had, or some, some concept, some notion that came to you around that time. And if you plant a seed with it, if you decided, hey, I'm going to start something new, maybe I'm gonna, new conversation, new business, whatever, new venture, then you might be seeing it take a definitive step forward. I'm not saying you're gonna like build it out and have like a company headquarters and be CEO or whatever like that, but you might be taking some definitive step forward around this time. If you made some committed action around this point back in November 20th, or even
Mhm.
at the first quarter square when these two were forming a 90-degree angle to each other. One last point I want to make here, which I find is interesting. There's actually two. Because these are at 28 degrees, we had some other activity going on around this time. You'll notice up here, opposite the sun and moon, we have Uranus, and it's at 29 degrees. And so it's not exact, but it's close enough. And these two would eventually pass opposite this Uranus here in Taurus. And so this idea, and like I'm looking at the Mercury in particular, but it almost looks like maybe like the sudden jolt of inspiration, which we know Uranus is
Mm.
quite capable of. So it's almost like something, maybe it came from outside, maybe it was, some encounter that you had with somebody who's just like, boom, in your face with something that you didn't expect. Um, but you might find some inspiration from that, or maybe you got some. Again, it could have been a dream, it could have been an encounter, it could have been a communication, could have been something wild. Like, I mean, I've had calls, Mandy, where it was like maybe like 1:30 in the morning where I've had a Uranus transit, and like nobody calls me at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, but like I literally got a call from somebody, and it was just the most random thing. I think it was like a guy at a bar that was like I hadn't talked to in 10 years, and he just called me out of the blue. So it could literally be something like that.
Wow.
Um, the last thing I'll point out here, so we have the opposition, of course, between these three. And Uranus, we also have this trine, which is a 120-degree angle, very favorable from Neptune. It's also at 29 degrees. So these two are forming a sextile with each other, which is a favorable aspect here. But then we have the 60 degrees, and then we have these over here, Sun, Moon, and Mercury. So it almost suggests, like I said, looking at the timing, and of course it's different everywhere in the world, but it's almost like maybe there's like some favorable, like intuitive something coming from Neptune here. And it's
Mm.
almost like I mean, this is my read of it, and of course, it could be different for everybody, right? But I feel like it might be something intuitive, something you feel like, of course, I'm going to do this, or like, oh yeah, why not? Some inspiration. Like this is literally like something that might inspire an artist to like, have like that eureka aha moment, and then they go out and like create like the most beautiful artwork piece of their life, or music, or something. So there's a lot around thoughts. There's a lot around kind of like spiritual visions, ideas with this and all. And so I say all that to say that it's coming to a head now. And so maybe whatever initial inspiration you got around November 20th is coming into full view now. So this would be the harvest of that. So I'm just curious, and we both love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, just like what you think. Like, what does this full moon mean to you?
It's like, okay, it's in Gemini, so does that mean we should like I mean, my first thought is like, okay, are we like watching out for people who are gonna like be two-faced?
Well, I mean, I think
But I'm
that's
like, I know
probably
that's not like all of Gemini, right? But it's like
right,
I
right.
always associate like when someone's like Gemini, I'm always like, uh-huh, interesting. Like,
Well, it what
you
it
know,
probably means is that it could literally be a person. It could literally show up as a Gemini on some level who maybe shows up in, wherever Moon and Gemini is at it in your chart. It may be a literal Gemini. It may
astral
be,
person.
sometimes I've seen things like sometimes astrology is very literal, right? Like you might see maybe you have an encounter with a cancer person, moon rules cancer, or the essence
Oh,
of cancer. This person might have a Gemini moon, so they're very talkative and chatty, different things like that. Or it may, be a Gemini person. It can also show up because Gemini is a duality. Gemini is like the essence of
right.
duality. So it can show up. I mean, the lower end of that is, of course, the two-faced person, who's like
Yeah.
flighty and inconsistent, and they're one way here, one way with another person, and it's like they turn on a dime, right? The other thing
Mm,
could literally be like a split idea, or like maybe that
mm.
inspiration you got back on the 20th comes to fruition, and maybe there's two different angles of it that you can pursue.
Oh,
And so you can
yeah.
say, oh, wow, or, or it comes to you get the inspiration to do it, or, it's communicated to you some kind of way, however it comes, but there's a duality about it. It's like,
Mhm.
I could do this side of it. I could do this side of it. I see this side, but what about this over here? And
Yeah.
so there's even with Sagittarius, there is kind of a duality as well. I mean, because we think of with Gemini, Gemini is a sign of the twins, right? So you have the two
Yeah.
twins. So they're
It
going to do
sounds
two
like
different
Libra
things.
too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, there is kind of
yeah,
a, you're right, Libra lady. There is kind of a duality with Libra because you have the scales where you're balancing things, you're weighing
yeah.
things. So you're really looking at two different opportunities here, two different sides of maybe an issue or a problem. It could also be that maybe you didn't see the whole picture before, and that maybe whatever you were confronted with around the new moon back in November is coming to a head now, and it's like, oh, now you're able to step back and see the different sides of things because maybe you're focused on one side and then the other side is revealed to you. It's like, oh, well, I didn't consider that. So you mean there's actually two angles that I could tackle this from, or you just didn't see the full picture. You were just so
Yeah.
focused on the one side of it that you didn't see the other side. And so now, it comes into like an awareness, perhaps probably on an emotional level, since it's Gemini and the moon. So it's like an inspiration that may come through or an idea that may come through. The other thing is that Sag is actually a dual sign too. We don't typically think of it as one, but remember Sag is the centaur, and the centaurs were
Mhm.
like these half horse,
Yeah.
half man, human like beings that,
Mhm.
inhabited these bodies and it was representative of the very animalistic nature that Sagittarius has, or that, I think humanity has too, of course, but that we can be the savage beast, but we can also be this higher functioning human being. And the centaurs in mythology were, quite this, kind of like raucous bunch of they drank, they partied, and could fight and argue and just could be very very murderous and destructive, but they also had the ability to function at a higher level, which is what Chiron did, who was their
Mhm.
king, and is represented by the asteroid or comet Chiron
Yeah.
between Saturn and Uranus. So there was kind of a duality there. So even with this maybe suggests that there could be, whatever it is, it could be very physical, whatever the inspiration is on a like an egoic personal level, but there is a sort of like higher functioning too. So it could be something around embodiment. It could be something about like, really being in your body and going from it in a very like earthy inspired way, but also and spirited because it's fire, but also like, I mean, like just going for it in a very physical way, but also having like the higher like human piece of that too, and looking
Mhm.
at things from that perspective. So again, duality all around here, both from an emotional level and also on a physical, embodied, egoic level too.
I'm just thinking about, I got just today, I was thinking about like, okay, I gotta like get back to my health and fitness schools, and I'm like, so body, I'm like listening to you and I'm like, huh, body. But then I'm thinking, oh, I need to do it in a different way because what I have been doing hasn't been working. So let me get like, well, this feels like more Virgo about it. I'm like, let me calculate all of my math. I'm like doing all the calculations and then I'm like, tell me the exact like percentage of a banana I need to eat to get the exact macro. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm like listening to you speak and I'm like, oh, that's interesting because it's like the physical, like working on the, like literally working on the physical, but from a very like intellectual, like thinking about how to do the physical.
And it could actually be very, I mean, despite like there's not really anything in Virgo here, but Gemini can be very analytical too, Mandy. And I
Hmm.
did hear you mention
Yeah.
the dual side of things though. So you are looking at it, and I'd say whereas Virgo tends to be a lot more practical about like the nuts and bolts of doing things, because
Yeah.
it's an earth sign. So there's like
Yeah.
that practical hands-on piece. Gemini is the idea, but it's also like Gemini can be incredibly analytical and very like, mental about things. So
Yeah.
there's that kind of like mental, like looking at things, examining things from different perspectives, different ways, and just looking at it like, okay, well, how can I make this work? So I think you do, even though it feels Virgo, and I'm not saying it isn't for you, but I think you're probably, you might be feeling this here.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I thought Virgo at first, but now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, it's the Gemini. It's the
yeah.
like idea. Because it
Yeah.
is not actually practical. It is more of like, okay, like what are some of the ideas around how I could do it differently? You know what I mean?
And it could also be activating something in your chart too, which, I don't think you have a
Maybe.
whole lot going on in Virgo here. I mean, even like an asteroid or something, like we would look at that and, that's what we would also do for a reading too, is, of
Right.
course, plugging our readings here, but yeah, we would definitely look and see like, how this full moon would line up with your planets in your chart. And, that is something, of course, you can reach out to us and seek a reading where, we are running those right now. And we're happy to discuss your astrology with you and look at different things that might be going on for you at this point in time, how the new moon last month and the full moon is affecting you and other things moving forward throughout the next several months into 2026. But yeah, this would totally, just based upon how it lines up with your plans. And it could even be, anytime you have anything that could be analytical, like I said, air signs deal with concepts a lot. So there's
Yeah.
that, but it could be activating that. I mean, you do have a bunch of planets in Libra, Mandy. So, I mean, that could even be, you
Yeah.
are, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, the scales weighing things like you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how do I want to strategize? Do I want to work out this way? Maybe I want to do some weightlifting today. Maybe I want to do some running another day. Like, when should I
Yeah.
do that? And analyzing that. So,
Yeah, I feel like it's like even higher than that though, because it's there is like that element to it, but it's like I'm also like, there's this somebody I was listening to who was saying like, oh, you need to really she lost like 80 pounds or something, and she's like, this is how you do it. You must get the math right. Like you can't be like just out there eating cleaner or less snacks. Like yes, do all those things, but the way you really like double down and do it is you have to understand your math. And so you need to know how many calories are you using right now in your life, like not like there's a whole calculator and everything you can put it in. um and then you can start making deficits. Like you can't just like stop eating this and stop doing that. You might have some result, but her point was like you're always going to be in like a yo-yo diet or a cycle or not seeing results or gaining the weight back or whatever until you get very rigorous about the math. And so it's like you have to understand how many calories you need, and then you have to create a deficit from there. But it can't be like too extreme of a deficit because then that throws things out of whack. So it is very like I hear you say like with Virgo, I could see like making a calendar for when you're gonna work out at the gym. But I think this is more Gemini in that it's like this whole concept of like, because how would we really know how many calories we need? It's not like we have like a tracker on us or something. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah.
even the best math is like just the best math. Like we don't actually, I don't even know if there is a way you would do that. Like how would you actually measure, you know? I think everything's an estimate is my guess, like people's best estimate. But her point was when you get very rigorous about the math like that, then you can start to see actual consistent results. And
Mm,
you
yeah.
know so anyway, it's much more of like a concept like you're saying than a practical
Air
like,
sign.
okay, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
like, now I'm seeing like, oh, that's so interesting that I was having that experience just this evening on my walk
Yeah.
and happened to notice the moon. So I was like, oh, it's gonna be, that's right, the full moon's coming.
I think that's spot
So
on, Andy. Like, I mean, it feels very consistent with, my sense of things too. That, yeah, I do see the, concept piece. And it's like kind of an inexact science, but like with the
yeah,
moon again, there's like that feeling, but there's also a knowing. So it's almost like this like mental awareness that's intuitive
yeah,
about like, counting calories or like, knowing like how much energy you spent or, like if you're trying to cut, you're trying to drop 80 pounds and like I mean, obviously, you're not gonna probably spend much time at McDonald's, and you're not gonna get like, or even go to like
No.
Longhorn Steakhouse and get the steak and everything else like that. You're gonna look at those things. You maybe go to a Subway, or you eat a vegetarian diet or whatever, but you're gonna be
Yeah.
calculating, hey, this sandwich I know is probably like 500 calories. I'm gonna do half of this, and so I get 250 calories. And well, if I have like 1,000 calories and it's breakfast and that's all I've had so far, then I probably can't do too much more for the rest
Right.
of the day, or I just do that a little bit more sparingly. So,
Yeah. It
yeah,
was interesting because yeah, it is very much more. Yeah, I see the connection there.
yeah,
And she made a good point that you should choose like, do I want to do this for 8 weeks, or do I want to do this for 12 weeks? Because she was like, it's not something you will drive yourself mad with all the math and stuff. So she was like, do it, create a result. And then she described a whole process of going, she called it like a reverse diet. It's like people who know this stuff are probably laughing at me watching this. Like, what? Yeah, duh. Everybody knows this.
yeah,
But where you go, because you're working with your metabolism too. So it's like you take a couple weeks off, you increase your calories a little bit, and then you go back for another round. And she was describing her own journey and saying that, she's like, I did this for like 16 months. Like, there really is no fast way to do this. So you've got to be very like, again, like you have to just get really rigorous with the math and like go for it and then back off for a couple weeks and then start a whole new cycle and then back off, and you'll over time you'll have results, of course, but it's much more like you can see just in my describing it, it's like this and this and
yeah.
it's
Very
much more
conceptual.
than yeah, it's much more than just like buy the broccoli and don't have like cocktails at night and don't eat fast food. It's like it's much more about like what to do and all of these ideas and concepts instead of what not to do, which
Yeah,
is like the quick, like fast. I don't know what that would be in the chart, but like,
probably a lot of Aries
the fast
energy.
thing, you
Yeah,
know, what
yeah.
would be the speed one? I'm like,
I mean,
which type
Sam's
would
can
that
actually be
be?
pretty quick.
They
Gemini can also
can,
be
yeah.
pretty quick. But I mean, again, this is more, again, like thinking of more of like a feeling conceptualization of it, which I think you nailed perfectly, Mandy. And
Yeah.
I think that's one way that we could go about doing things. Because again, you're looking at, this is a culmination of what happened on November 20th. And, not that we have to be like overly like attached to it, like having happening at the exact time of
Yeah.
the new moon going into the full moon. But, this general feeling may be coming up around this time. And so it's, looking at things, it's an examining of things. And it is an opportunity to harvest. I mean, since this is basically the fall of um, the fall of basically the cycle of the new moon is the spring, the beginning of spring. It's March 19th or 20th, when we have the spring equinox, so to speak. I'm just
Mhm.
basically layering this over, like, I mean, the way and this really speaks into how I look at cycles too, because you can really look at like a cycle as like, the new moon of anything, or like whenever two planets meet, even the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which we're going to talk about probably in the next episode. But that's basically the spring of a brand new cycle. So
Yeah.
anytime you have a full moon, it's actually harvest time. It's actually the fall. Like, what do we do in the harvest? We basically take whatever we've done, whatever we've grown from the spring through the summer, and we step back and, very much as you said, Mandy, like we're taking a look at it and we're conceptualizing it and understanding it from that perspective and just, kind of going from there. So perfect energy, perfect time to really step in and look at anything, like from a workout routine to counting calories to maybe how many Christmas presents we still need to buy. I haven't even started yet, so
Oh my God. Yeah. It's like so close.
yeah,
It's only 20 some days like it's like the same thing every year. It's, Thanksgiving comes and then Thanksgiving's over and then you're like, "Oh my God, how am I here again so quickly? I only have 20 I only have, right? 22 days to get this all done."
I know. Which you also might need that.
Ah!
You also might need that Gemini energy from. or 4.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Please click subscribe below and follow us. Welcome to our community.